Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Allie. It is day 30, the final day of the September series where I upload a video every single day for a month. I don't know what possessed me at this point to do this challenge, but I did it. This is my wrap up, a couple of stats, speed round wrap up because I have vlogs on every single one of these videos. I will put down the playlist for the September series down below if you want to catch up on any particular book. And then just some thoughts I have. I don't have many, so don't get too excited. Just a warning, I really hate wrap-ups, so it's kind of a sour video to go out on, but honestly, I've loved doing the September series, but I've had so much fun talking to you guys in the comments. Y'all have been so great to me, hyping me up every day. Oh, that's sickening that I made you watch that many videos. And I even have a whole stack of books here that I got based on your recommendations or just books that you mentioned. So shoot your shot down below if you think I'll enjoy a book, but you can't judge me if I don't like it, okay? Overall goals I had for this challenge, first and foremost, was just to upload a video every single day for the month. And honestly, I did not have high hopes. Historically, when I make lofty ambitions and stuff like that, almost the instant I say them out loud, I lose a lot of momentum and I get scared and then I don't do it. So in that way, I'm very proud of myself for completing this series, even though it was annoying probably for me and you. The second goal was to read as much as I possibly could and read more than I ever have, which happened to be 14 books in 1 month. I definitely surpassed that, as you will see in a second. My other goal, I was gonna focus on these books, just look at them when I don't know what else to read, and I think I read 9 of them if I'm correct, but I do want to DNF 2 of them. The Spanish Love Deception, I have no idea where I'm pointing, so I'm going to stop. I DNF'd that, the physical copy, and so I got the audiobook from my library and I started listening to it. I still can't get into it, so I'm just going to DNF. And then the Book Eaters, last month I read about half of it, and I hear it's like not bad, but I don't think I care. But for every book I struck off of this list, I've added probably 2 more, so not sure what the point of that was. Okay, my stats for the September series are the same as they were yesterday for page count and book count. I read 23 books, which is definitely more than I've ever read, maybe more than I ever will in 1 month. And I read, oh my God, I don't have my computer right here, this many pages. Also, I'm sitting here, usually I do my wrap-ups in front of my bookshelves, but the Neighborhood Kids, which if you watch the September series, they become a big part of my stupid filming life because they sit in this tree that's literally right next to my window and they stare at me and they yell at me. And it is just horrifying. They've been in that tree for 2 hours, which is why I'm now faced with filming this as the sun is going down. Anyway, the only other stats I have for you are the genres and the ratings. So this is my little chart I made in Excel for the genres that I read. It's a pretty even disbursement, I'd say. I didn't do that intentionally. I just really like a lot of random genres. The most of which I think is fiction. I read 4 fictions. And here's my little chart for ratings. I gave the most ratings to 5 stars. Wait, does that make sense? You know what I mean. I think I gave 6 5 stars, and that's very, very like groundbreaking for me. I'm kind of picky with my 5 stars, and I had a lot of good reading and good books this month. I do have 4 books that I did not rate, mostly because they're a genre that I'm not comfortable rating or not familiar enough with. Okay, moving on to what I'm sure will be a very speedy wrap up. I'm just going to show you the book, tell you the genre, maybe give you a sentence of the summary, what I rated it, and what I either liked or didn't like. 1 sentence. Okay, Allie? You can do it. For memoir, I only read 1 book. It was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I'm sure you read it this month too. This is the story of her childhood and her relationship with her mother and her relationship being a TV actor, or not a TV actor, a child actor. I mean, I guess she was on TV. I gave this 5 stars because it really was touching, but it was also really well written. Definitely check the content warnings. Next, sci-fi. I read The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey, and this is about a woman who's a brainiac scientist and she figures out how to make human clones. Her husband steals her, data or whatever the science stuff is, and he makes a clone of his wife, our main character, and then he dumps his wife for her. It's truly tragic. Like, something else crazy happens and it's just a wild ride. Honestly, I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my all-time favorite books now. My favorite thing about this was honestly everything. It was the discussion of upbringing and ownership, but also identity. It was just so meaty. And then I read Upgrade by Blake Crouch, and this is about a man who is exposed to some sort of something. Whatever it is, it modifies his DNA, which is really crazy. And some things happened. He is upgraded, my friends. He has some abilities now, and we see how this affects him. I did not rate this because it really turned into an action film. Not even a book, a film. And it was just not for me. I really did enjoy the first maybe 25% of this. My favorite part about this was definitely the concept of this happening and the sort of abilities that one could get from like DNA modification. But also it was very scary to think about people using this in the future to like fuck the world. Not literally, but like fuck it up. Ew, Allie. Moving on to horror, I read, according to Goodreads, 2 horror books this month, and both of them were 5 stars. First, I read The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this is a retelling of Carrie, quite clearly. Follows our main character, Maddie, as she deals with the shittiest people who ever lived in a book. Her father, who has told the town that she is white and is forcing her to pass as white, and who's just racist and abusive and then there's just bullies, teenage bullies, adult bullies, just racist ass people in this racist ass town. And this book, though 5 stars, is one of the most frustrating books I've ever loved. Definitely check out the audiobook if you are an audio kind of person, because there are mixed media elements in here where I don't know if it's like a podcast or a television series, and they have like a little song play and they have a cast of narrators. Then I read Woman Eating by Claire Coda. Loved this book. This is about a vampire. I guess that's why it's classified as horror, but it really does not feel like a horror book at all. It felt more like fiction, even though it's a vampire. Our main character, Lydia, is away from home for the first time. She is like being a grown-up, trying to find blood for herself, living on her own without her mother for the first time. Not too much happens in here, but the discussions that this author has about identity on so many different layers, about being alive, but also of a human versus a vampire, of being Japanese versus Malaysian, versus being British, versus being a woman, versus being a man. It's just, there's so many discussions in here, and there's so much that our main character is grappling with that it is so beautifully written and well done and thought-provoking. Loved this book, 5 stars. Then I have quote-unquote thrillers, and it's funny what Goodreads distinguishes thrillers versus mystery, because those genres are really so close. The first book I read for the September series was The House Across the Lake by one Riley Sager, whose name I've heard smeared in shit. That was intense. I'm not sure why I said that, but I feel like I've had my doubts about this author. This is about a woman who, she's had a bit of a hard life lately. Her husband drowned in this lake, and since then, she's just been an alcoholic. She's been having trouble grieving and dealing with things. And so she goes back to her lake house to get away from the media. And she meets this woman across the lake. So while she's drinking herself to death, she's spying on this family, and shit happens. I have to say, it gets quite interesting quite early. Within the first 7 pages, because we're dealing with a bunch of different timelines, we see that shit is getting intense, is going to get intense. And so the anticipation is pretty good. Are you fucking kidding me? These kids are outside this window now. I ended up giving this, I think, 4.5 stars because I had so much fun. The twist, there are a few twists like in every thriller or mystery, but this one, I loved it. Then I read Confessions by Kane Minoto. This is a story about how at one point a little girl is killed. Everything that happens in here is sort of a result of that and also an explanation of that. My favorite thing about this is that it is told in such a cool way and it's constructed so creatively. So it's almost like short stories where every single chapter is another narration. But what's very cool is that we are being talked to as if we're a character in this book in each of the stories. So in the first one, it's the mother of the child, and she's talking to her middle school students because she suspects one of them is responsible for her daughter's death. And so she's speaking to us as if we are a student in her classroom. In the second one of the students is writing to the teacher, and so we are the teacher being like given a letter. It's very cool, very cool. I did only give this 3 stars though, because I found the actual story a little underwhelming because there was so much repetition and the repetition made sense. Like there was a purpose for it. It sort of drove the story and made us realize that everyone has a different perception of things, but also gave us little clues and insights after each time we recapped everything. But all in all, I was a little underwhelmed by this. And then we have mystery. Okay, first I read Ruth Ware's The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I already said that. This is the author of The Turn of the Key. So I really enjoyed this, and I was hoping for the kind of twists and turns we got in that book. So both of these are kind of whodunits, but in The Turn of the Key, that wasn't really the enjoyment of the book. The enjoyment was everything that happened outside of that. This, the stakes aren't high. It's not really creepy like in The Turn of the Key. And so it fell a little flat for me, and it was so fucking long. This is about a woman who, I don't know, 10 years ago went to Oxford University, and she had a roommate and best friend who was like the it girl at the school, and she ended up getting murdered. It's not a spoiler. In the present time, the person who was convicted of murdering the it girl passes away while in prison, and so our main character is grappling with that and with the fact that she's the reason why he's in prison. So we get dual timelines, and those were really fun, the timeline of them back in school, just because, you know, it's more like a dark academia book for those parts. But I thought for being this long, it was kind of predictable and underwhelming. I'm gonna say that a couple times in this video, I think. Yeah, this one was kind of frustrating with its length, which you will see in my video if you watch it. Then I read The Maid by Nita Prose, and this follows one of the best characters I've ever read, Molly. I just love Molly, and I want to be her sister, her mother, her best friend. Molly works at this fancy ass hotel. And in the beginning of this, it makes you want to watch The Grand Budapest Hotel because that's just a great film. But Molly comes across a rich dude who's murdered in his hotel room. But our character Molly does not react like other people, and she's very literal and she's very honest. And so the police are instantly suspicious of her just because she doesn't match up to what they expect a person should match up to, which is really frustrating. And so Molly sort of has this found family, which is one of the best parts, and she has to kind of clear her name and figure out who actually did kill this man and why he's dead. I was gonna give this like a 4 because it was just so warm and fuzzy, but the epilogue pissed me off, and I have to give it like a 3.5 now. And I don't mind the epilogue, there's just one thing that happens in it. I hate how we were told about it. I feel cheated, I feel betrayed, I'm pissed. Then yesterday I read Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. And in that way, there is a family. Well, I don't think there's a family in the other way, but now I'm just synopsizing this. In this book, we follow Daisy Darker, and her family are going to her grandmother's house for her grandmother's 80th birthday. And all of them, except for Daisy, are very invested in the grandmother's fortune and their inheritance that they stand to gain when she passes. And so it's kind of Knives Out at first. In And Then There Were None, people start dropping dead and you have to figure out who's the murderer, and it's very similar to this. I really had a lot of fun with this. I think I gave it, what did I give it yesterday? This is the most recent and I cannot remember. I gave it a 4 or 4.5. The twist really, well, there are a couple twists like in every mystery thriller, so no spoilers, but it was worth the read. Very good twists. It's the one that I didn't see coming and one that makes you want to like start the book over with that thought in mind. Okay, let me turn some lights on, hold on. Oh. Next we'll do manga. Okay, so I read Nakamura, or what is it? Go For It Nakamura. And this is a manga about a boy who is in school and he's like obsessed with this guy in his class. My favorite thing about this is that Nakamura, he is creepy. Not like if he were older, it would be actually a little menacing, but because he's young and we know after a little bit that he's actually kind of innocent and he just has this huge crush and it takes over his whole world, and it's really funny and it's fun. And in the end, it's actually very heartwarming because he just wants this guy to be his friend. I didn't rate any of the manga because I'm very new to manga, so I just don't know how I feel about it yet, but I enjoyed it myself, definitely, for all of these. Then I read Blue Flag, and again, it's about young kids, well, not young kids, but like teenagers who are in school and they all have crushes on different people. This one was interesting because there were more characters than in like Nakamura, and so it felt like the potential for a lot of mess and miscommunication and maybe a polyamorous relationship, I don't know. The art style was definitely my favorite, I think, of the bunch, just because I read it on my Kindle, so maybe that has something to do with it, but it really did look like I was just looking at someone's sketchbook. Like, it felt really raw and like penciled. It was very cool. And then I read Fruits Basket, and I think out of the three of these, I enjoyed this the most because although this has to do with young people, teenagers in school, and dealing with being a teenager and having crushes, this also has this cool mythological element to it. So the main character is living in a tent right now on the lands of this one family, and the family find out she's there and they're like, yo, you look pathetic, come in and live with us. But our main character literally like falls on top of one of the guys and he turns into an animal. And it happens that the Somas, the families that she ends up living with, have a secret of their own. When embraced by the opposite sex, they turn into the animals of the Chinese zodiac. So it was just so cool to guess like each of their zodiacs as a new character came on to try to figure out who was who. And I'm sure as the books go on, we'll have more of that. There's this weird family drama happening that's really brewing in this book that I feel like is going to explode in another. But my favorite thing about this is just the found family aspect. Like, our main girl, she finds her little home, she finds her little family. All right, moving on to romance. Not a very good month for romance for me, although in some ways it was. So I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I was so looking forward to this book. It's about two authors. We have two timelines. 10 or 15 years ago, they fell in love over 7 days in June, I'm guessing. And now they see each other again at this conference, this like book conference or whatever. They have been writing each other in each other's stories this entire time. And that pining, that sort of obsession, that got me really excited. And I really enjoyed the first half of this book. The second half, I wasn't feeling it. It got kind of boring and kind of weird in tone. It was just strange because the first half was this very sort of serious, almost dramatic telling of these people in love. And then it turned a little silly drama in the very middle, and then it turned into like a comic, like a romantic comedy. So I don't know, it was kind of all over the place, but definitely the beginning of romance books I love the most, and then it usually tapers out for me for that. So this is like a mix of a 5-star and a 2-star, therefore it's a 3-star. I don't know how that makes sense, but it does. Very similar in many ways. We have The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. This also follows two authors. It's a second chance romance. This one's sort of best friends to enemies to lovers. And so we also have multiple timelines, we have multiple points of view, lots of pining, lots of meta stuff happening in this book because they're constructing a book together. In my video, I go into like all the layers and how excited I was about all of this in the first half, like in 7 Days in June. And my favorite part of this was that a married couple wrote this. So a married couple who was in love, hopefully, wrote about a couple in love who are writing about a couple in love. I'm sorry, that's amazing. But likewise, it did peter out, it got convoluted, and I think it just should have been shorter. I ended up giving this 3 stars. And then surprise of the September series, Love on the Brain, I liked the most out of the romances that I read. I didn't have high expectations for this. I thought it might be a little silly, and based on some reviews I'd been seeing, that I thought it'd be too much like The Love Hypothesis, which I did enjoy, but also found horribly cheesy. This book, there are some similar parts to The Love Hypothesis, but it was way less cheesy, people. This is about our main character who gets a job with NASA, which is just so cool. But it turns out the lead, like the co-lead on the project that she was heading, I don't know how to talk about this stuff, is none other than her sworn nemesis. Except she's the only one who thinks that they're nemesis. And so it's a story about them working together, about them figuring out their past together because they both have two very different perceptions of it. There's lots of miscommunication, but it gets resolved each time pretty quickly, so that's pretty nice. The only thing that I didn't like was that the end of this is sort of like a wannabe thriller, and it wasn't nuanced. It was very, I don't know, it was lackluster, and it was kind of a waste of time, I think. But what I liked about this book that I didn't enjoy as much in the others is that there wasn't this huge like love and romance, and then it kind of couldn't live up to that. This was pretty steady the entire time, so I can appreciate that. All right, now it's fantasy time. So first I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I initially thought this was sci-fi, so excuse me for having it on the list, but it's not. It's almost mythological. So our main character is in 1714, and she is being forced to be wed, and she really doesn't want to be. And so she's desperate, and she prays to whatever god will answer her. And this sort of demonic, evil little god named Luke comes up to her, and he's like, yo, if you want more time, I want your soul. She agrees, but obviously he was being a sneaky little bitch. It turns out that no one can remember her, not even her family. And I think the concept of this and about how she is invisible was really cool and way more intricate and detailed than I thought it was gonna be. I thought it would just be like, people just forgot about her. But it's way more intricate than that. I won't get into details because it was part of the fun of reading it. That was probably my favorite part. Also, the interactions between Luke, the dark god, and her, our main character, were so interesting because he's sort of her kidnapper. And in that way, it's like Hades and Persephone. But, you know, we do have a question of like, is this Stockholm Syndrome? I guess I was only questioning that, but Addie from the moment, she just, I don't know, their relationship was very interesting. And I don't ship them because, you know, Luke is a menace. But at the same time, they had so much more chemistry, even just as a pair of characters in the book, than Addie had with whatever his name was. And I honestly could not tell you what it is. It's not even on the front flap. So I don't think we're supposed to care that much. That guy character, I'm so sorry, I don't even think I knew his name while I was reading this book. He was a pretty cool character, like his story, but obviously forgettable. And the fact that Addie and him create this friendship makes no real sense besides the fact that they're like, this is the only person I can hang out with. You know what I mean? I think I ended up giving this 3 stars, but I'm gonna bump it up to 3.5 just because the concept is very cool to me. But I'm not changing my graph, okay? We're almost done. Wrap-ups take it all out of me. My voice is like, and my brain stops wanting to form words, like my mouth, and I say like 100 times. Like, shut up. Then I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This follows a woman who is a witch, and she uploads YouTube videos like doing witchy shit, but she makes it phony enough that no one will actually think she's a witch. However, someone sees them and figures it out, and they invite her to the school to be a teacher for these 3 young witches. And there is a grumpy librarian. And so this is half found family fantasy and half grumpy sunshine romance. And those halves did not equal a whole, my friends. The romance did not interest me that much. I don't even think there's that much chemistry. It felt pretty forced. But then also it took away from what this book started as, which is this found family aspect. And we get introduced to the students, but they're not so much characters as they are just a setting for this woman to have her romance. And then I don't know, this just had an identity crisis, I think. I think I gave this a 3 stars, but I kind of want to bump it down to 2.5 after some time apart from it. Then I read When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Niveau. This is one of the novellas, the second in the Singing Hills cycle. I always forget that. In these novellas, there's a main character named Chi, and they are a cleric. They go around and they take in everyone's story for like history and document it. That's what I love about this series, is just storytelling within the story. And this is like so good for that. So Chi is in this pasture. I don't know if they're documenting the mammoths there or it's just a go-between another trip, but they're on the back of this mammoth with some woman when they're suddenly chased down by 3 tigers. They are sort of held prisoner from these 3 tigers, and they turn into women, the tigers do. They tell Chi to tell them the story about this famous tigress back in the day, to see if Chi and the humans have gotten the story correct. And so in that way, it's so cool because Chi is now telling a story, and Chi's like the story master. But even cooler is that in between Chi's story, they interrupt them to correct Chi, but also then to tell their version of the story. And it's so cool. It's also one of those storytelling stories where the story that they're telling, oh my God, that was a confusing sentence, is just as interesting as what's happening in the present. Present timeline is pretty high stakes because the tigers want to eat Chi and their friend. I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was great. Okay, last genre, we have fiction. Ooh, first I read Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Also, I'm realizing I'm talking too much about these books. So I gave this 5 stars. It's one of my all-time favorites. And it's about this woman who goes to her high school friends years later, and her stepchildren are these children that burst into flame. It's about found family, but it also has this like weird darkness to it, even though it's cozy. It's the weirdest combo, and I loved it. The writing is really comical because it's kind of sharp. I don't know. I can't explain to you how much I love this book. It's just very, very me. And I also love the toxic friendship, but also the weird burgeoning sexuality between the two. And then I read Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. I read this initially like months and months ago. This is about a young woman who ends up at a church working for them, even though she's an atheist lesbian. And she sort of innocently pretends to be this dead woman. I don't know how to explain that more concisely, but the police start asking questions and she suddenly looks suspicious. And she is kind of interesting in the way that Molly is interesting because our main character is very honest, but she's also strange in that she talks about things that other people don't. She's also very lonely. This was very funny. It was very sad. It was very touching. Said a lot about depression that made a lot of sense to me, and I really loved it. I give it a 4.5 just because I did take so much time in between starting and finishing this, but I think upon reread I would definitely give this a 5. Then I read How Not to Drown in a Glass of Water by Angie Cruz. This is a book about a woman named Kara. She's from the Dominican Republic. She's now 55 years old and she's been let go of her job because the factory has moved to like Costa Rica. And so she is telling us her whole life through these counseling, like job counseling sessions. And so we're kind of like the counselor, but we don't say anything. She's talking straight to us and telling us all about the random people in her life, what she does throughout her day. And at first it seems kind of trivial, but little snippets of how much she's been through bleed in. There's also a sort of mystery about why her son won't talk to her anymore. And in between these sessions, there are like mixed media in the form of like forms, bills, resumes, that sort of thing. If I could tell you any audiobook to listen to all of these, I mean, if this interests you, I would pick this one up or get it from the library. If you can stand it like some old lady is talking to you. I mean, she's only 55, but she seems older than that. Honestly, it was like an entire production, how this was set up. You can hear things like in the background. It was so cool. I think this is just a beautiful story about a woman, an immigrant who is dealing with so much in her life and who's had to really fight her way through life, but also how she can, with the strength from the people around her and her family and friends, learn new things and change and be more open-minded. And it's really beautiful. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but yeah, the audiobook was great. And then I read The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn, which I was so surprised to see just in fiction genre, just because, I mean, this is a thriller writer or mystery writer. I guess it is sort of fiction. Anyway, this is a very, very short book. I listened to the audiobook. It's only 64 pages long, and it's about this woman who has a very interesting job history. You'll have to check out my very short video to listen to me read the first sentence, but make sure your headphones are in and you're not at work. Anyway, she ends up going to this lady's house to like cleanse it. She's this fake spiritual guru. It's this interesting story of whether something is paranormal or just a creepy family, and not having all the answers, but dealing with a character who thinks she's smarter than everyone else and she's not. It was just really fun. It was really fast, and I thought it was cool. And I like how it ended. I ended up giving this, I think, 4 stars. So yeah, that's it. I'm kind of bummed that this is our last video just because I hate wrap-ups so much. I want to thank you so much for watching all of my videos. And for those of you that commented and liked, I feel so close to you now. Y'all are just too nice to me, and I've had so much fun literally because y'all have been there with me and for me, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Some final thoughts on the September series. Honestly, at this point, I'm kind of ready to be done. I don't think I'll be doing Vlogmas in this capacity, maybe like a weekly vlog. Although something I did learn while doing the September series is that daily reading vlogs are so much easier than weekly ones because you have so much less footage. It sounds really intense and difficult, but once you get a routine down, it is so incredibly easy to do it. If it weren't for the fact that it is almost a letdown when you don't finish a book a day, I think daily reading vlogs would be the way to go, honestly. So if you are interested in doing Vlogmas, I would say definitely try it because it's way easier than you're thinking, I promise you. I think one of the hardest things to do is to remember that I have to take a thumbnail every single day. You know what else I've learned about this, about myself during this, is that even though I am a mood reader, for sure, as a booktuber, it's way more effective for me to be a TBR girly. Because on those days where I knew like the night before what I was gonna read the next day, I had this sort of intention every day, like, oh, I'm going to read this book. And it helped me with the motivation, it helped me to start, complete, and upload everything. Whereas on those days where I didn't know what to read, I ended up reading like the first chapter of 10 books. And it was frustrating, and I ended the night feeling like, I don't know, annoyed with myself. So I think maybe going forward, I will be sticking to a TBR. Maybe I make it every week. I don't know. But that's definitely something interesting to think about. All right, guys. As I said, I love you, and I will not see you tomorrow. I don't really have an upload schedule, although at this point, I think I can say that I would be good for it if I made one. But I'm sure I'll see you within this next week. So I hope you had a wonderful time, or at least an interesting time watching these videos, and thank you again so much for being so wonderful. Okay.